Special focus tonight. A 26-year-old chartered accountant who worked at Ernst & Young in India died in July, just 4 months after she joined the company. Anna Sebastian's mother, Anita Augustine, has now written a letter to Ernst & Young India chairman Rajiv Memani, detailing how she claims workload and stress at the workplace took a toll on her young daughter's physical, mental and emotional health. The letter has gone viral and sparked a huge controversy over work culture in the country. Mr. Memani has now responded in a social media post. He claims the company remains committed to the well-being of its employees. The larger questions, of course, remain and are a subject of our other special focus. Let's raise the big questions. Are our workplaces now getting more and more stressful? Is overwork being equated by some companies to hard work? How important is it to have a work-life balance, and how does one take that forward? Those are some of the questions I'm going to raise on a very sensitive issue again. Joining me now, Probir Jha, founder and CEO at Probir Jha People's Advisory. He's an HR expert who's been working with some of India's top companies like Cipla and Reliance over the years. Also joining me at this moment is Professor Matthew Thomas. He's a corporate trainer and leadership course. Appreciate both of you joining us. Probir, to you first. The ENY case, tragic as it is, has brought the focus once again, particularly in this instance, on the young and the work pressures they face in high stressful jobs. What's your sense? Is this only the tip of the iceberg? Is there a wider problem out there among the young as they enter the workplace in these stressful jobs?
Yes, Rajdeep, I think that it's the tip of the iceberg. I think it's only getting worse. This obsession, particularly in India, with long hours equated to great work, is a very misplaced social myth. And I think that is what gets carried to corporates. There is no denying that many areas, many businesses, many industries have possibly more difficult and longer hours. But this is actually being callous, being indifferent. And I think there's a case for us to look at not only hours, but also very deeply internally questions around culture, leadership, quality of talent, fundamental questions around rewards practice. Is the bottom line the only thing which matters? What is the right trade-off? So it triggers actually to my mind a lot of deeper questions than just one unfortunate and tragic incident that we saw.
But Probir, where does the buck stop? Is it with leadership teams? Is it with the overall work culture? Is there a tendency to imitate, to ape Western practices, which may not necessarily fit in with Indian culture? Or is it just simply professional competition today?
So it's not about aping the West. I think the West is a little more sensitive on this particular matter compared to Indian companies. I think it's a lot of celebration of long hours as the way forward for India Inc. and for India's success. But to me, if I had to pick one specific thing, Rajdeep, and I've written about it, I think it's very poor role modeling of leadership. When generations of leaders see more tyrannical, more slavish long hours as the only way of leadership, when people get promoted for just generating the moolah, and therefore being slave drivers, they replicate the same behavior. And that is what gets pushed down the line. And, with this 24/7 work expectation, which unfortunately has been triggered in the last some years, the problem has actually become very, very severe. And I think there's a need to acknowledge, and there's a need to seriously reflect as to what is the right balance. I think also, if I may share, that that people joining the workforce also need to come with their eyes and ears open. At the end of the day, a big money packet or a good title or a good company by itself is not the best career choice or a workplace for that particular person, because each one's mojo and each one's personal abilities could be very different.
Right. You mentioned leadership, and therefore I want to come to you, Matthew Thomas, as someone who sort of works with corporate leaders. We've heard Narayan Murthy create a stir by suggesting that Indians need to work harder, longer hours, and that created a lot of, there was a backlash to that, especially among many of the young who felt, look, that was old India. New India wants to have a work-life balance. Is the problem with leadership in companies which is unable to accept what does this work-life balance really mean?
Yeah, Rajdeep, I personally feel the basic core problem is leadership and the coming generation, Gen Zs. They have already entered the corporate workplace, and the leadership teams are normally from the Generation X. Now, Generation X will always have a generation gap with this Generation Z, and their expectations have been very different. Now, we need to understand that this word work-life balance has changed and evolved over a period of time. During our times, it was like 8 hours of working and 8 hours of family time and 8 hours of sleep. Currently, the Generation Z is talking about a qualitative experience. So it's not about spending more time, maybe that 72 hours, that fixed mindset is not what Gen Z is looking at. Gen Z is talking about making meaningful contributions at the workplace. So that's more about a qualitative aspect rather than the quantitative aspect.
No, so why are the leadership of the company? So is there a generation gap? Is there a generation gap, Matthew, that the leadership, which you say is from another generation, is unable to accept the idea that, you know, we'll work fewer hours but we'll contribute more?
Absolutely, Rajdeep. I think the current problem in the corporations is that the leaders are typically from the Generation X, and the frontliners are from Generation Z, and these Gen Zs and Gen X needs to change. They need to adapt. They need to understand that it is, I mean, the times have changed, and we need to adjust to the demands of this new generation. And that is why there is so much of gap. And there is no doubt why people are calling this as toxic leadership. The reason is because we need to change, we need to adapt, we need to accept these new generation thought processes.
Toxic leadership is the word used, Prabir. Is there not enough training at leadership levels to understand perhaps, or to reduce this generation gap that Matthew just spoke about between leaders from one generation and employees from another?
See, there's a lot of fig leaf action, Rajdeep, which gets done. So if you were to talk to a company, they'll rattle off number of hours and people who've gone through training programs. I don't think this issue is one of training. See, it's about conscious display of sensitivity, and which is back to that point that finally people observe how leaders behave. You can do any training program, you can do all these so-called wellness programs and offer it. Actually, does it work? The issue, Rajdeep, is we are trying to address the problem downstream. The issue is upstream. Why are you waiting for a fire to be created? The valor is not in dousing fires. Prudence is about preventing fires. Look at the way people get promoted. Look at the way you look at your staffing norms. If you have to hire 5 more people, hire. How much of bottom line obsession necessarily has to happen? And you know, this entire thing of passing or kicking the can down the road is something which flows from the top down. And I think, therefore, it's an issue of deep cultural ignorance, denial. And, you know, my favorite expression, which I keep sharing, that, you know, companies are trying to solve a pediatric problem with a geriatric solution. It's a very fundamental problem, and success stories, you know, can wipe out a lot of, dirt that otherwise exists in very successful companies.
You know, but this work stress that you just spoke about, some people are able to adjust to it, others are unable to adjust to it. There's a high degree of attrition today across the board, even among younger employees. Is there a need for greater psychological guidance, training, or you're saying that's not the issue at the moment?
No, it helps. I'm not saying it is not needed. It helps. But all that I'm saying is it can help you with some coping mechanism. But actually a deeper analysis of this, and at least my firm belief is that if companies were to start thinking about how they are organized, how they work, how they lead, how they assign work, how are managers sensing sense of fatigue? You know, and it's not just hours of work. It is also the lack of appreciation, the lack of sensitivity, the lack of language. So it is not physical endurance which is at stake here. It is a lot of emotional endurance. And I think companies are falling very short of emotionally understanding the left brain bias of leadership in most companies continues to prevail. The one who gets his Excel sheet right, spreadsheet numbers right, is the guy who gets elevated and promoted. So you're promoting the wrong breed of leaders. And unless you step back and say, no, we need more wholesome leadership, better role models, better display of sensitivity, I don't think any of these band-aid measures will be adequate. And it's not about the odd, fatality in the CEO's, playback that I read. The fact is that a life has been lost, and it doesn't matter whether it's 1 out of 100,000. The fact is that life has been lost, and there is a deeper issue, and it will depend on the integrity of companies and systems to get better.
So what's the solution? First, you, Matthew. If there was one solution, there are no magic bullets, obviously, but if there was something that you would look at, what would you suggest today to corporate leaders? What should they be doing to ensure that their employees feel more, perhaps, more people who companies
one of the most important thing
desire
is
to
we
hold
have
on
a typical
to?
mindset.
Go ahead.
I think first and foremost, we need to redefine leadership. It's not just about a vice president or a general manager and above. Leadership concepts will have to drill down, because it is rightly said that people don't leave organizations, they leave their managers. So the leadership concept should drill down to the managerial level. And normally, traditionally, we have a tendency to drive productivity and profitability. I think modern managers and modern leaders should be aware of the fact that the undercurrent or the foundation of any of this profitability or productivity should be well-being. We should ensure that the employees who work with us, they have the right physical well-being, the right emotional well-being, and the right mental well-being. Only on the basis of these three parameters should we drive profitability and productivity, which currently is missing in the Indian context. So I think one of the core measures should be to see to it that we are taking care of the well-being of our employees, typically the mental well-being.
Very quickly, Probir, do you have a solution out there, something where companies should be starting with?
Build, promote, and practice wholesome leadership, Rajdeep, is how I would put it. Angularity on just profitability and bottom line and functional expertise does not build leadership or the culture that will be able to inspire and engage and be sensitive to the growing number of younger workforce which is coming in.
Very, very sane advice from both of you. I hope that there are corporate leaders out there listening, as well as members of Gen Z who seem to be caught or almost trapped in these excessively stressful lives as they see it. Thank you both very much for joining me here and shedding light on your views on the show tonight.